so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality, and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another. Which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week, to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host for the day, Erica Middlemiss. I am just another reflection and extension of you who will be here filling in for our beloved host, Brandon Beecham, leading the way to ensure your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, this episode of the Positive Head Podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online, and you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads, welcome back. Thank you for joining us on another episode. Again, I am not alone today. I am very, very happy to have Charis Melina Brown with us today. Hello, Charis.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I love coming and hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, so fun. So why don't we start off today with reading a review?
Excellent. Would love to do that. This is from January 26th. It was left by Ajna. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that one. Jana or Yana. Don't know how to pronounce that one either. So apologies, Anya, if I did not pronounce your name right. Love to you. This is called Synchronicity in the Smart Board. And here's her review. Hey, Brandon. You are doing such an amazing job with this podcast. Every morning I wake up tired and generally cranky, LOL. But this podcast brightens my day and puts a lot of aspects of life and spirituality into perspective. I'm a pretty new listener, so after listening to some at random, I started from the beginning yesterday. I'm a pre-nursing student who also works 30 hours a week. Needless to say, life can get pretty stressful sometimes. I listened to episode 2 today, right before a quiz I was going to take where you reflect on the different synchronicities you've had. Well, I was feeling halfway confident on the quiz and had 5 minutes left before we started lecture. My professor proceeded to turn on the smart board. This is important, I promise. So a minute or two goes by, and it's on. And I was thinking about the idea and concept of synchronicities. So in my head, I thought, if the spiritual path I've decided to follow is actually for me, I want the smart board to turn off. After the smart board had been on and the 5 minutes were up for the quiz, my teacher collects the quizzes, and as she passes the smart board, she turns it off. She said something along the lines of, I have no idea why I just turned that off. And I had to try so hard not to just shout out to everyone that I had my first conscious synchronicity. It wasn't anything spectacular and fireworks didn't stream from the ceiling and my wish of world peace didn't magically occur. But even just that little spark of a thought that I had that came true really spoke to me. It makes me want to continue on my journey to learn about one true self and elevate my vibration to its truest, highest potential. Not only that, I got 100% on the quiz. Haha. Thanks for all you do. And please, please, please keep up your amazing work.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ajna. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly as well. We're sorry if we're not. AJNA is how it's spelled. But
yes, and congratulations on getting 100 on your quiz.
And for having your first conscious synchronicity, because that's how it works. We have to ask the universe. Never, ever forget to ask. And when we ask, we receive. And that's a really beautiful example. So thank you so much for writing that in.
Yes, synchronicity is so great because you start trusting it and then it starts working more and more. And it's definitely a feedback loop.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The more you pay attention, the more it's there. You have to pay attention to. Yeah. So I'd like to start off today by first apologizing for our last review that we read, because I do realize that the way it came off did sound a bit insensitive. And I want to apologize for that, because actually this is something that is a very, very sensitive topic for me. It's probably the topic that lights my fire more than any other. So what you were probably hearing in my voice was a lot of frustration, and I did let it get the better of me. And that's when you heard me say, why does it matter? Because I wish I would have said, I wish it doesn't matter. I wish it doesn't have to matter. And by that, I mean, I wish we could stop focusing so much on skin color. What is our skin? It's a part of the meat suit we call a body that our soul chooses to incarnate in. And we are not a body. And we get this in other ways, but I don't understand sometimes why we can't understand it when it comes to this specific topic. And so, yes, I got also a little bit defensive. And I did, because one of the main things I do here at the podcast is to book the guests that we interview on the show. And there are a few ways that we do find our guests. One of them is that we reach out to the guests and we send them a request. Another way we get guests is if they reach out to us. And we get a lot of those. And when we look into their work and see what their message is, and if we think the topic is interesting, then we will book them on the show. And the last way we can get our guests is if listeners suggest people. So that's always welcome. So if you guys ever want to send in any ideas, please do so. We welcome all suggestions. So I want you guys to understand that the guests who come on the show are the ones who either agree to our requests or have requested to come in to the show. Now, a little bit of background on Brandon and I, because I know y'all know Brandon a little bit better than you know me, or a lot better. But personally knowing Brandon, he is one of the most accepting, inclusive, and non-judgmental people I know in the whole entire world. And I wouldn't just be saying that if it wasn't true. He really, really is. And as far as I go, I'm someone who craves diversity. I thrive on it in my life. My life would not be the same without it. It's how I live my life. And I do not see skin color. And you see skin color as far as appearance goes, yeah? But it's no different than seeing someone as a young person or an old person. So yeah, I do. I get a little defensive, and I'm sorry I came off as defensive, but the way that when I get defensive is because I'm asked to see or judge someone based on their skin color. Yeah? And when I'm asked to see color, for me, that immediately translates to, now you're asking me to see my own family as somehow different than me. And I refuse to do that. We are all a human family, just have varying amounts of pigment in our meat suit. The other thing is that it was also assumed somehow that we were being uninclusive. And I can promise you, we are not. We want everyone of all different ages and races and ethnic backgrounds and colors on this show. We absolutely encourage it. We are never not allowing anything. So when I get a request to notice the color of someone's skin, I have a hard time with that, because I don't want to ever live my life that way. And I don't think anyone should live their life that way. And what's important is the message that the people are bringing. That's the most important. That's always where my attention goes when I'm looking at people who request to be on the show, is what is your message? I couldn't imagine getting a request and thinking to myself, well, what's the color of your skin? And then going from there. No way. I will not ever allow that. So, and if that's something that we did on the show, I wouldn't be a part of it. I couldn't be a part of it. That's not how I live my life. And by saying all of this, it's also not to say that we don't admire and respect and celebrate all cultures and ethnic heritages. we just want to focus on the light side of things, the positive side of things. This is the Positive Head podcast. So we want to focus on all of the beautiful things about our differences, not on the wounds from the shadow side of these differences. So we all know that where attention goes, energy flows. We can accept this on other levels when we talk about it. So why are we putting our attention on the shadows and on the ignorant part of this discussion? Because it is ignorant to exclude people based on skin color. So yes, there are many, we understand, or we should understand, that there are still lots of ignorant people out in the world. And yes, it is our responsibility that each and every time we see injustice in our own face, that we stand up and protect what is right and good. But if all we are focusing on is the injustice, then that is all that we are ever going to see. I see a world that is changing and growing and evolving in love and in unity. I see these little stages year after year, and that is where I choose to focus my energy. We have to heal this. So the only way to heal this is to focus on the good and praise our wins. We have to see the light that's peeking through the clouds. We have to. Otherwise, we're never going to heal. We're going to stay in our wound space. I look at the children today. I have a teenage daughter. One of my favorite memories of her so far in her life was watching her and a few friends get dressed and ready. They were all getting ready. And once they got done, I'm taking their pictures and I'm looking at them. I'm like, wow, this is so beautiful. My daughter's half black, half white. One of her other friends is a Muslim girl whose family is from Yemen. And one of the other little girls is half white and half Asian. And they were all getting ready and dressed up to go out to their friend's bat mitzvah. How beautiful is that? That's the world that we live in. And that's the world I want us to focus on. We have to see this actually happening and changing. This is why we focus on the positive. So I know I'm still probably upsetting somebody about this, but I just want you guys to understand this comes from a place of love, and it comes from a place of focusing on the positive. Charis, would you like to comment on this?
I would love to. Okay, so Positive Head listeners might not realize that I'm a person of color. I'm half black and half white. I was raised in the South. I know sometimes you can't really tell. You gotta look at the picture. That sometimes you can't really tell. I was on a radio show once about some of my extraterrestrial experiences, and one of the people commented and said, I don't understand why it's always white people talking about extraterrestrial experiences. And I was like, hey, what?
Hold on.
No, half, 50%. But I will say. So this is actually a subject that I don't talk about that often in my work, in my public work. And it's not because I shy away from it. It's just because usually I'm focused on other stuff. But it's something that I get pretty fired up and passionate about because I do see it from both sides. Now, I have a white father and a black mother. They were married for 20 years. I was raised in rural Southern Virginia, where quite literally after the Civil War was over and the Yankee soldiers were coming down enforcing the fact that there were no more slaves, they never got past the river in my town. So to this day, If you drive through the poor sections of my town, it's freaking slave quarters. You can look at it and see. You're like, oh, there are all these tiny houses and only black people live here. I've had so many racist experiences in my life. That was a huge shaping component of my entire early life. And I didn't realize that racism wasn't rampant everywhere. And it wasn't something I was going to have to deal with my whole life until I went away to college in a more diverse city where I realized that it existed. There were people who could not look at race. I didn't know that that was even a possibility until I was basically an adult. So I do feel qualified to speak on this topic. And I do feel like I have the chops to be able. I've been on both sides of it. I have had a mother of someone I was dating call me and tell me to stop dating her son because I was half black. I've had people who wouldn't hang out with me because I was too white. I've been on both sides of it. And I will say this. Yes, there are people in this world who are straight up insert bad word here's, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, that is the truth. That's true. But it also breaks my heart when I see people attacked and vilified when they didn't mean anything by it, when they did maybe just put their foot in their mouth accidentally, or even say something that was a hot button when they didn't even know. I used to use the word boon in my tarot readings when I would say, okay, what's the boon that comes from this? And then it came to me from an angry person one time that was a racial slur in some other country. I didn't even know. I meant the benefit, which is what the word boon means in the language that I've been familiar with my whole life. So it is possible to set off a trigger without meaning to. And I think that it's a really tragic thing when people attack. Specifically, I'm talking about when Black people attack white people right now, when they really don't mean anything, because there are enough people out there who do mean harm.
Right.
That I feel like when the attack is given and they don't mean harm, I think that makes it worse. And if you look at little kids, they don't see it that way. We teach them this. And I will also say, and this is a story that I might get crucified for saying, but you know what? It's Speak Your Truth Day in my world. So I'm just gonna say it, because I actually was embarrassed and shamed and felt yucky about this. And I was going to a spiritual center in Los Angeles, which is predominantly Black, called Agape. And I would very, very much recommend that. Anyone who wants to go to Agape, it's a beautiful, the music alone, it just ascend you right there. It's incredible. The message is always pure. And I was inviting some out-of-town friends and some in-town friends to come with me. And I had someone who is in my life come, who is a Black woman who I really love. And she came, and I had some other people from out of town come in. One of them was a white woman who I also really loved. And I didn't mention the race to each other when I said, hey, my friend X and Y and Z is coming. You can meet them. Great. Because in my mind, I wasn't thinking about it, because I'm part of all the teams and none of the teams because of where I sit. And I was standing with the out-of-town friend when my in-town friend, Black woman, came over, and the look on her face when she realized I was standing there with a white woman, the amount of racism. And I will say the most racist person that I know in my life is a Black person. And she's a kind, loving woman who speaks from her trauma, and it drives me nuts. And I find myself arguing with her all the time. And I was embarrassed because I saw her face fall, and I was embarrassed because I was like, hello, we're all friends. This woman is a nice woman. Just because she's white does not mean whatever it is that you think it's going to mean. And I think that in our culture, if we're talking about this, I feel confident in saying that I personally feel that it is atrocious that in the Black community, racism against white people is encouraged, and it's a way to connect. And yet in the white community, racism against Black people definitely is not. I will say behind closed doors, white people do not talk about Black people in the way that Black people, in my experience, have talked about white people. And it hurts my heart every time. When I'm sitting in a room full of Black people and someone might make a racial slur, and everyone laughs and it's okay. And I'm looking around saying, my dad's white and I'm half white and I'm supposed to be okay with this. But if I were sitting in a room full of white people and they made this comment about my mother and the part of me that's half Black, that definitely would not be okay. And half the white people would stand up and say, hey, more than half, I'd say a good 80-90% at this point would stand up and say, hey, dude, that's not cool. But in the Black community, no one does this. This is not encouraged. That's not okay. And so that's spinning this argument on its head, because it definitely happens both ways. And in my understanding, as a person of mixed race who has been attacked for both, I've been attacked for being too white, I've been attacked for being too Black. So right now I'm like, screw all you guys who want to attack me for my color. I'm me and I'm a different thing. But I do have all of it. This is what I'll say is that, yes, it's a part of the healing process to say there's a wound. There's a wound. If we don't say that there's a wound, it's going to get fester and it's going to kill us. Yes, you have to say that. But at a certain level, you have to start being like, okay, great, there's a wound. How do we heal it? So I do think that first comment that was like, hey, maybe you guys should invite more people of color on the show. I would appreciate it if you would have more people of color on the show. Great, fantastic, awesome. Mm-hmm. Duly noted. But then when that attacking vibe comes out, when that attacking vibe and trying to cut you down comes out, no, that's when I stop listening, because I have a dedication and a commitment in the work that I do that I only respond to unifying vibes, to vibes that are here to heal and here to make us grow. So we can talk about race all day long, but if you're going to start trying to crucify people or put them up in some kind of witch burning kind of vibe because they're not cowering and they're not saying, oh, you're so right, I'm so wrong, and just because this stuff happened, that means that now we can't have a voice and we can't speak about a healed world. That, I think, is missing the point, And granted, these are all my opinions. They do not necessarily represent Positive Head, disclaimer, but I feel actually really strongly about this. And I don't talk about it all that often because it doesn't come up. And so I'm glad that it came up because it's something that I'm very passionate about.
Well, it does need to come up. This needs to be talked about more and more and more. But the way it needs to be talked about is by focusing on the light side of things. Like when we look at other cultures and we praise the history and the beauty of the art and the fun. I'll tell you what, I have way more fun with the black side of my family than I do with the white side of my family. You know?
Interesting. That's interesting.
Way more fun. And ever been to an Indian wedding before? Holy cow, is that a good time? You know?
Yeah, all the races. And you know, something that I really love about my Black heritage is that, yes, we were ripped from our nations, stuck on slave ships, forced to be bred, beat like animals, murdered and killed, feared and ostracized. And yet we have built one of the most thriving, abundant, inspiring, generally badass cultures on the world today. And I'm proud of that.
Amen.
And
exactly.
That's where I want to focus.
That's where we should be focusing.
When we can. But now, when there's a wound to be healed, it's important to heal the wound. But part of it is saying there's a wound, and then the rest of it is saying, okay, how do we heal it? And that's something that you don't hear very much in the racial discussions these days. You hear a lot of people saying, there's a wound, there's a wound, there's a wound, be sorry, you're bad. Mm-hmm. But you don't hear, okay, how can we come together? Yeah. How can we actually make this better?
Right. Where's the solution here? Let's not focus on the problem and the wound itself.
Yeah. So I think we're headed there. I have faith, and just look at the kids, and that right there tells you that it's going to happen. We just have to keep wanting to heal, keep dealing with issues when they come up, but not dealing with them from a blind perspective on either side. Right. Dealing with them saying, okay, now it was horrible things that happened. Yes, it's true. And where are we now? And what can we do now?
Yes. Yeah. Where are we focusing? And, you know, one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Carolyn Mace, she does a beautiful talk about the energetics of healing. Speaking of healing here, because this is definitely something that our society as a whole needs to heal. So this, you can find it on YouTube. We're not going to play a clip because the whole thing, parts 1 and 2, is about 3 hours long, and it's hard to just pick a specific clip from there. But it's called The Energetics of Healing. And one of the things that she talks about is that as a society, we are almost trained, I shouldn't even say almost, we are trained to connect with each other based upon our wounds. And so when we meet each other, it's a way for us to connect by saying, oh, your life was like this. Well, mine was too. And then we have this camaraderie there. And when someone calls you out on your wound and says, okay, I'm aware of this wound. And she also says, you talk about your wound 3 times. And after 3 times, now it's time to heal and let it go. Right. But if we keep talking about the wound, focusing on the wound, it'll never, ever let go. It'll keep us in that trauma space.
Yeah, it's a slow process. I know that it's in the DNA. There are deep, 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 horrible things that have happened. It's true. But then again, you come back to the purpose. Why are we here? Mm-hmm. What are we doing? And at Positive Head, for instance, we're here to focus on the positive. So part of it is commitment to the work.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's really important to focus on the positive, you guys. That's really what we're here doing. We're also here trying to talk about elevating consciousness and thinking about things from a higher perspective. And so, you know, thinking about race on a 3rd dimensional body level is a very 3rd dimensional way to look at things. And that's a lower chakra way to look at things. And I want to look at things from the higher chakras, more loving, more unified. Yes, we're all one. It's not a cop-out. It's an actual real thing that once we get to understand that we are all one, we look beyond our meat suit.
Yeah, I like all the chakras. That's one of the things that I often say is like, I don't want to go to heaven and just have harps for all of eternity. I want to have drums too. Yeah. I want to have all of it. So we get that feeling in, we get that earthy, delicious, intense depth in. And then we bring our higher chakras to it. And we say, okay, there's this issue. Yeah, we are in 3D. We are meat suits. We're speaking out of our meat suit mouths. It's true. Mm-hmm. And so how can we honor that and revel in it and bring the wisdom and the understanding of our higher chakras and the parts of us that are more aware of our divinity and forget it less to the conversation. Yeah. And so I would love to challenge every person who might be feeling their emotions coming up right now as we're even talking about this, because again, it's a wound. Because I'm sure that there's at least one listener who's probably like, oh, well, Charis can't really speak it because she's not full black. Like me being half black is not enough. So there's always a thing. But I would love to challenge anyone to really take a moment, just silently. You don't got to tell anybody that you did this, but really look at yourself, really look within yourself and say, where am I speaking from? That concept of the pain body, like Eckhart Tolle talks about. And what is my goal right now? Am I just needing to be heard? Because if you're needing to be heard, we hear you. Horrible, horrible, horrible things have happened. It's true. No one's contesting that. But then what is the goal? Are we trying to heal together? Are we trying to point more fingers at each other so we feel validated in our pain? You can do either. It's really just up to you. And it's all of our opportunity and our responsibility to keep our own house clean.
Yeah. One thing I like to, when we're looking at our energy body, is to think about, where do I actually feel this in my body? Like, where does this tinge me? Right. And then we can look and see what is the lesson of that chakra or that energy center, and go from there. Because, you know, when we allow our energy to be taken away from one of those lower chakras, and especially that root, because it's such an important foundation, we drain all of them. Not just the root or the second or the third. We actually drain all of our chakras from the head to the toes. So it's really important to check in and notice where things are hitting you, why it's hitting you that way, and how can we look at the light side of it as opposed to the shadow side of it? How can we heal this? What is the solution? Those are the questions. I think it's a one-to-one. Yeah, I think it's case by case by case. Sometimes the solution is saying, hey, that's not okay. Sometimes the solution is saying, I'm going to think about this from your perspective for a second and see if you actually did mean to offend me. You know, like I said, sometimes people are offensive jerks, but often too. And I cry for those people too. Those people who really did not mean to be whatever people think they are. And then they're just vilified. And there's been something in our culture that said, that's okay, that we want to do that, that if you even touch the wound, if you even touch it at all, we're just gonna nail you to a cross. But I think that it's important to say, let's heal it. You know, well, how can we heal it authentically? Really, each of us trying, not just the ones who did the harm, and especially because they didn't do the harm; their ancestors did the harm. So not just who's to blame, but if we all want to reap the benefits, how can we all come to the middle and help each other? Right, and that's the thing. It's about coming together and finding that happy, positive perspective amongst each other. And yeah, you know, I'm certainly one of the least racist people that I know. I mean, it's so I get a little wound up when someone says, "Hey, you're not including other races," you know, when that's never, ever, ever, ever the intention, you know? It's something I would love to ask people to do as well, if they feel so inclined, is especially when you feel triggered up, to watch where you're sending, because psychic attack is a real thing. And those of us who are in the public eye, whether it be from radio shows or YouTube channels or television or movies or whatever, it's very easy for someone on the other side of a screen to say, oh, they're X, Y, Z, and then paint all these projections on them of what pain, whatever pains that person's been through in their life. And especially for those of us who are intuitive and healers, we can feel it. So please be responsible about the vibes you're sending out, because psychic attack is messed up. Right. Straight up. And so please don't do that, because it all comes back around to where it started. So self-love. Yeah. You're not doing it. Yeah. And I never want to portray being insensitive to someone's needs, being not compassionate or not loving. But there comes a time when a little tough love is warranted here, because we do want to grow and we do want to heal. And so that's why we're even having this discussion, and it's partly why I'm not talking about my own personal wounds from this. I don't like to do the victimology thing and to relate and connect that way. Have I had my own experiences in the last 15 years? I certainly have. I've experienced lots of ugliness. The things that my own family would say to me. I mean, God bless my grandmother, and this one isn't so bad, so I will tell this one. But she was losing her memory quite a bit as she aged, and she even forgot the fact that I was pregnant with my daughter. And so when I had her, she looked at the baby, and behind my back, she said, "Wasn't it so nice of Erica to adopt that little black baby?"
Oh, Lord. Wow.
I know. Like she, it's like, oh, geez, Nan, it was just, her generation and the way she wasn't being hateful about it. But, in her perspective, in her, 85-year-old brain, it just didn't cross her mind that was like possible somehow.
Yeah.
And so,
because it's what we're taught. It's what we're taught.
Yeah. And that's, the thing about what we're taught, a lot of times we grow up with our family telling us these things about how we should be, but I don't like it when people shit on me. How about you?
Don't shit on yourself and don't shit on anybody else.
Please don't shit on me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I know that the perspective that we've been bringing, it's something that I never hear people say publicly because it's such
a hot topic.
A minefield.
Yeah.
But that also makes me want to say it, because I feel like it's something that should be said, because from the other side, people are always like, no one's saying this, so we're going to say it. So no one's saying this, so we're going to say it.
Right. And again, that's why we're talking about this, because this is a wound we have to heal as a society. And so let's start asking ourselves these questions about how we can actually heal it. And we all know how we heal other things, so we can heal this the same exact way. We have to show it love and acceptance, focus on the light, acknowledge the shadow, yes, but once it's acknowledged, now we bring in the light. We cannot stay in shadow space. I, for one, refuse to do it.
We just won't go very far.
Right, exactly. We're not going to evolve that way.
Yeah, and I understand that things like forgiveness, even though it's interesting because something in the race issue, and even really all of the discrimination issues, whether it be race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, whatever it is that generally the person that you're dealing with in the here and now is not the one who injured you.
Right.
So something that happens is, especially people who are oppressed, whether they be a gender or a race or whatever, it's easy sometimes from that place of pain to lump together the oppressor as an entire thing. However, I know of a very famous person who said something like, not the color of someone's skin, but the quality of their character should determine how we feel about them.
Mm-hmm.
And that also goes for who we blame for what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it works in all directions. It's one coin. There's two sides of it. Always. Yeah. And again, important to look at both sides, the light and the dark. But the dark is not where we focus. We focus on the light.
Positive Head, at least.
Not here.
You can go find places where we'll talk about that all day long. But there's a commitment on this show. There's a reason that we're even recording this, and it's to focus on healing.
Yes.
And so I will say that when I left my little small town and went out into the world, it's been a really lovely time. First off, having people try to guess what race I am, because no one knows. Like, like, what are you? What are you? But it's been really nice to be able to go to places, and when I tell someone what race I am, when they ask me, not see their eyes fall and not see their face shift, and have it be a beautiful thing, and be able to take pride in my heritage, both sides of it, for me to be proud of being part Black and not have to hate my white side, and for me to be proud of being part white and not have to hate my Black side, because that's something I struggle with for much of my life. How can I love all of who I am? How can I take pride in the fact that I'm part Black and not hate the part of me that's white? and vice versa. How can I take pride in my Celtic heritage? How can I take pride in my heritage from Europe without saying that somehow the Black part of me is lesser or whatever? And how can I take pride in the part of me that came from Africa and the part of me that came those ways and not be angry at that DNA code up in me, in myself? It's been a long road, but now I'm really glad that I took it, because I feel like it's a unique perspective. And I feel like as years pass and as ages pass on this earth, we're all going to be mixed together. Yeah. And we are one race. We're human. And there's a lot of pain done with each other. I mean, we could sit here talking about the witch burning wound. We could sit here talking about all the religious wounds that have gone on. But the point is, we're all the same. And we will get through it if we let ourselves get through it.
Yes. Yes. We have to allow the healing to take place. The only way we do that is by looking at the positive side and the light side and appreciating and loving one another and seeing our unity and seeing that we are actually one. The DNA memory for me is an interesting one, because I don't believe that it's actually our memories are in our DNA. And I've heard people say that before, and then cite studies, and then I go back and I read the study and I'm like, that's not what it actually said. Because our memory comes from our soul memory. So what we are in this lifetime, what our chosen suit is in this lifetime, is not necessarily what our chosen suit was last time. And actually, when one of my other favorite teachers, Dolores Cannon, she says that when we choose to incarnate on the planet Earth, the very first time we do that, we're making an agreement to be every race, every religion, every cultural background, because we're here to experience it all. And when we do experience it all, then finally, one day, we will understand the true oneness that we all actually are. But that's carried within our soul memory, not in our body, Yeah,
I'm not sure where I sit on this issue. I definitely think that when a deep, deep wound is done, sometimes it can get encoded in the DNA. That's my personal opinion. I do think that. I think that also there are very, very subtle cues that are passed down through socialization. And sometimes it's a chicken and the egg question. Right. As what happened. So as far as studies and stuff go, I'm not sure. And also you've got that whole biblical thing of it takes 7 generations to clear something. True. Yeah. So I think I do think that there's truth there, but I also, like anything, you don't want to overuse that to explain something that shouldn't be going on.
Right. And which is why I wanted to make that distinction, because I think that the 7 generations is actually part of that root chakra family ideals and discussions and stories that are told to us as children and keep being passed down to us through our family, because when families talk about all the wounds, then they're passed to the kids, and the kids reiterate the wounds to their kids, and it continues from there. And I think that 7 generations, it takes that much time for it to just get smaller and smaller and smaller,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I honor all perspectives there. Right. I think that I'm somewhere in the middle with it. Yeah. Because of my own experiences. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I just know that what I see out there in the world is change. It's happening all around us, especially, I get it in the spiritual community. When I first started going to different things, I'm like, this is all white people. But never.
My question would be, what city are you in when it happens? What neighborhood are you in? Are there Black people there, period? Right. Or is it are there Black people everywhere, but not in this meeting?
Right. Because there are a lot of towns, and I happen to live in one that is predominantly white. So, I've had my child, come home from at school being in a predominantly white neighborhood, having certain experiences. So yeah, it's interesting living in a predominantly white neighborhood for sure. But yeah, I have noticed this in the spiritual community, but I also am noticing that year after year, more diversity and more diversity. And the reason why there's more diversity is because people are including themselves. Because I never noticed, even when I saw just a ton of white people, I never noticed anyone being uninclusive.
Yeah, I've honestly
Or
never noticed that in
bigoted.
the spiritual community either. No, not on race. And I've been in spiritual communities on the East Coast and on the West Coast and in the middle too, and I've not felt much of a racist bias in spiritual communities in general. No.
Right.
That's just my personal experience, so I'm sure it happens sometimes.
I'm sure it does, yes. But I think on a general whole, people are more loving in the spiritual community. And it's not by choice, really, that it's not as diverse as we would like to see it. But it is changing, just like the world is changing. And like you said earlier, Charis, soon enough, we're all going to be mixed together. And I'm very happy to contribute to that. I encourage all of you to contribute to that. Let's make some mixed babies, all different kinds of mixed babies, because mixed babies are super cute too.
Yeah. That's a lot of times that's what I hear people say. Well, it's a beautiful combination. I'm like, well, thanks. I didn't really have much of a choice from where I'm standing now, but I'm glad you think so.
But yeah, the more we mix ourselves together, even just different European countries mixing together.
Good for the DNA.
It is. It's great for the DNA. I mean, you see that, like, say, royal bloodlines, and they stick really tight together. It gets a little
and
funky.
They end up having
Same thing with puppies.
Weird things go on. Yeah,
right.
They got weird issues. It's true. Well, and like it or not, that's just a place that our world is going, and that's an argument too I have for any people of any color. I've definitely. I'm usually more frustrated with Black racism, because white racism, yeah, that's old hat. Yeah, it happens and we're getting over it. But Black racism, often I'm like, "Rawr, stop it. You know how this feels.
Yeah.
You know how this feels. You're not ignorant of it. So stop doing it. Two arrows don't heal the wound from the first arrow, And so I've seen people kind of getting a little upset at mixing races.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm very biased on that.
Yeah,
I'm super biased on that because I am literally one of them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But, like it or not, it's what's happening. So there's no fighting it. There's no stopping it. That's what's going on. So you might as well embrace it and find the love and unity there. Yes,
please. More love and unity. And also a lot more, just stop it. That's one of my favorite things. Again, Carolyn Mace she says that all the time. Just stop it. Just stop for a second and think about what you're actually doing here. Think about where you want to be and focus on that. And even Abraham Hicks, we talked about that the other day. The more you focus on the thing that's not there, the more that thing is not going to be there.
Yeah, and it's funny because you think, okay, my big question is always, how do we flip it then? How do we flip it then? If this is here, how do we flip it then? And I'll tell you the story. The best karaoke time I've ever had was at a gay bar in Pasadena. And it was the best. And the people had the best voices. And I was very young. I had just moved out to the West Coast. And I remember sitting in this gay bar and looking at all these amazing people and being like, oh, and I could feel what happens when people are unique on purpose and when they're celebrated for their differences. And there were all races, all different. In fact, there was this one man there who I was so captivated by him. He had this gorgeous falsetto voice. He could sing so high. And I don't know what heritage he was, but he had dark skin and long, straight Black hair. So I don't know if he was Mexican or Puerto Rican or Native American. I don't know. I didn't ask him. I don't know. I just know that's what he looked like. He had tan skin and long, beautiful, shiny Black hair. And I was just so captivated because he was one of the first examples I'd seen of someone who really embodied a beautiful mixing of the divine masculine and the divine feminine in one form. And I remember going home so inspired and saying, that's what the world can feel like if everybody can say it's cool to be different. So I'm not saying that race will disappear. Heritage is cool. Like, heritage is great.
So cool.
It's the great cultures of this world.
Yeah.
But it's a very different thing to look at heritage and be like, ooh, what flavors do you have? What kind of food comes from your lands? What kind of music? What kind of art? What stories? Tell me your stories. Tell me your myths. Tell me how you connected with the land and what your ancestors did. That's the same subject of conversation.
Yes. It's just
a
the light
different
side of it.
way to talk about it. Yeah. And that all day long I will talk about.
Yes,
but as soon as people start getting in victim role, it starts sounding like blah, blah, blah to me after a while.
Right. Right. You know, there's this amazing museum we have here in the Phoenix area. It's called the Musical Instrument Museum. And they have it separated out into the different continents. And each country or state in that continent has its own booth, and you wear headphones when you walk up to it. So not only can you see the indigenous instruments, but you hear it too. And talk about getting able to experience all the cultures of the world in one day. And the music.
I love that.
Because you're not just looking at the music, you're looking at their clothing and to watch even. I think it's so neat. Like, I went through Africa first. I love drumming and I love bright colors, you know, so I always want to start there. And what I find so neat is that as you go further north in Africa, how much the pigment of the skin changes. And that if I were to walk across somebody who was from Egypt or one of the other northern African countries, I would assume they were maybe Middle Eastern, right?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
the gradient.
very interesting. Yeah.
And it happens over time. You know, it's happened over time as everything's mixed together.
Right. And I just think it's so neat to see that and appreciate that and love it.
Yeah,
learn about it.
There are many, many colors. Many colors. And they're all beautiful. Even in one race, there are so many.
Yes. And really, like, what are we talking about? But like melanin in our skin and how much of it we have. Yeah,
but we're talking about culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
In this regard, yes. Yeah. But but when you're looking at someone just straight off the bat, it's how much pigment, you know, sometimes we look and we judge about how much pigment is in your skin. And at the end of the day, that's a silly thing to look at.
Well, and you've even got, I mean, in the Eastern cultures, how women would carry parasols and not want to get tan because a tan was a sign that you worked in the fields and you weren't of high birth. And same thing in European cultures, they would all want that milky white skin. And now you have those same DNA codes going to really, really toxic tanning booths,
trying to get darker
poison
skin
into their skin. Right. Yeah, that was always very interesting for me growing up because I was straight up not allowed to date many of the boys in my town because their parents were not okay with it. And meanwhile, the girls in my town were going to tanning booths, nuking themselves to look like me. But I could. It was a really weird paradox. Yeah, it was very interesting to try to deal with growing up. But now as an adult, I can look back and say, oh, what an interesting cocktail I was given to now be able to understand. And now when everything's coming up, and this wound is really boiling to the surface of our consciousness, it's definitely a good thing that it's happening. But we have to continue to move forward with it. And that's by each one of us changing our thinking. Every single one of us saying, okay, what little piece do I hold where I can grow a little, where I can come more a little to the middle, where I can take what the other people are saying, who I see as opposite me, and imbue it a little bit more into my thinking so that I can unify.
Yeah. And include myself in places if I feel like I'm being not included. I can turn around and include myself in that.
If I want to.
If I want to. Yeah. If I feel like it's something that I would like to be included in, then I can try to include myself. Yeah.
And then if you get turned away, that's another thing. But I think a lot of times, especially when people have racial wounds, a lot of times racism is cited to be a thing where it not necessarily is. I mean, and granted, it is a thing a lot, but I've also, like I've said a million times on this episode already, I definitely have a fiery nature when it comes to people crying racist when the person's not racist. That really bugs me because I think that keeps us from healing.
Yeah, it does. And that happens because that's where the focus is. So if the focus is always on the wound there and that people are always doing this to you because that has been your experience in life. So the next situation you kind of think, oh, this is going to happen again because this has continually happened to me. Then it's probably going to happen more so than not because that's where the focus is. And that's one of the biggest points that I'm trying to point out too, is that I just want us to focus on the light side. I want to focus on all of the beautiful things about our differences.
So I would love to ask, raising a daughter who is half Black, what are some of the most beautiful experiences that you've had with her specifically that you might not have had if she were all white?
I'll tell you what, I told you that one already with her and her friends. But it's funny because I see her as my daughter. I don't see her as my
We can think more about culture, like reaching out, maybe something that's happened to her out and about.
Well, so a lot of the things that have happened to her out and about. Okay, here's something beautiful. I'm like, I have to go through and find those. They are a little harder to find, you know. And this is where the mama bear in me gets like, because it's hard when this happens to your child. I always say you can punch me in the face all day and I'll probably turn around and forgive you, right? But you so much as touch a hair on my kid's head and I'm going to want to rip your face off, you know? And all parents can understand that. And that's not the most positive thing to say, but that's
just the truth of it. That's okay.
The mama bear. And I think a lot of parents understand this. But so we were in a very small town in Colorado called Salida, which is where my brother lives. And I love this town. Very, very small. It's got like 7,000 people, mostly all white cowboy type people. So there's the white cowboys and then there's the white hippies that live in this town, right? There, over the years, there has been, I've seen, again, more and more diversity there, which is super fun to see.
Nice. Yeah.
So we went to the crystal shop one day and my daughter and I were in there together, just perusing kind of separately. And she walked outside like, all right, Mom, I'm done. Although she loves crystals. She loves a crystal more than any. They speak to her. But she was like, come on, Mom, you're taking way too long in here.
It's time to go.
And I was talking to the guy who owns the shop because he's amazing and has so much knowledge. So they didn't know that she was with me. And it's these two older guys. Now, meanwhile, I am in the crystal shop. So these guys are a little bit more enlightened. But they look outside and they see my daughter and they're like, look at that beautiful Egyptian woman out there. Isn't she like a goddess? And at first I'm like, she's 14.
Back off. Back off.
She's just a baby. But then I'm like, wow, how beautiful. Like, thank you for respecting her beauty, And that's all that they saw. And I love that. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I went to a holiday party with my mom this past holiday season. So my mom works in the health system in her town, which now she lives in a pretty big city, one of the fastest growing cities in the nation. And she was invited to the holiday party of the head of her department, who's a white lady. Sweet, lives in an upper class neighborhood with the great big houses and all the things. And every year at New Year's, she throws a pajama party where everyone wears their pajamas. And I will just say, I saw some of the coolest pajamas there that night. Oh, my goodness. Anyways, so everyone comes and it's a neighborhood thing. So not only does she invite people from her work, but she invites people from the neighborhood. And this is in the South. I'm talking about in South Carolina. And everyone at the party was white except for us, for my mom and me, because my mom is Black and I'm half Black. And I grew up in a town where we would have been getting stink eyes all night, where people would have been whispering behind our backs, but especially as an empath and intuitive, you could feel that. And the town I grew up in had 5,000. So it was very, very, very small. And so especially being back in the South, I ran away from the South for that reason. And so I was a little like, oh, what's about to happen? And the energy that I felt, which really it gave me confidence that the world is changing before my eyes. It might be taking it some years to do, but it's doing it. Is that the vibe that I felt, even from the old people, 70, 80 years old, who maybe are the same ones that would have looked at us with a tilt to their head before. The energy that I felt was first that they were proud. There was diversity there.
Nice.
That they were like, yay, there's diversity here. That they were curious about my mom and I. It was a liking feeling. The thing that I did notice that was a little harder to deal with was that trying to connect was a little bit hard, because you do see the difference and it's like, okay, well, the truth is they could have talked to us about anything that they talked to anyone about. And then we did make the bridge and it did happen. But it's that moment of like foreign, but not foreign attack. Foreign, look at how progressive we are, that we have diversity here. And then also, we're curious about you. We want to learn more about you, but we don't quite know how to approach. So it was like this funny little dance all night. And I will say, as an empath, it did tire me out. And I was glad to leave and go home because I was just exhausted. But it was, I felt no nasty vibes, nothing. And it was so healing for me too, because I definitely carry wounds that don't even come up all that much, because my work is in a different arena now, but they're in there, and it is stuff that has happened. And so that experience healed stuff within me that I didn't necessarily even know was there.
Wow, that's beautiful. And you just reminded me of another beautiful thing about having a mixed child. So my father I'm going to say was, because he has healed a lot in his old age. But I grew up with a straight up bigot as a father who used to make the most awful comments. And even as a little wee one, like 4 or 5 years old, me arguing and being like, Dad, that's not right. Don't talk like that about other humans. I just knew better as a little one. And watching the change in my family, because I have a mixed child and because they see her, like he sees her as his grandchild. He loves her as his grandchild. And then one day he made some kind of bigoted comment. And I turned to him and I said, Dad, you do realize you're talking about your granddaughter, don't you? And his face dropped. And he didn't realize. He just didn't. He was like, holy cow. Since that day, he has been a changed man. He like doesn't see it like he used to.
Quantum moment. Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes. And what I've realized because I can get in all the doors, you know, because since I am in the middle. So I do hear what happens behind closed doors, because I've heard so many people say XYZ, but not you, Karen, you know, like that kind of thing. So this is what I know. No, not knowing. Okay. I won't say knowing, but very, very minority. People don't realize they're racist. They don't mean to be racist.
Right.
And the second that you put it in their face, first they're like, nuh-uh. But then eventually they're like, wait a minute. And that's something that I'm still waiting on in the Black community. Honestly, is being like, wait, it's not okay. It's not okay. No, it's not okay to make fun of somebody's race and call them stupid or less human or robotic or whatever it is.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who don't. And so that's fine. But it's that jump, that leap that you just described, where people are like, wait a second, I'm an a-hole right now.
Right.
And let me not do that, you know?
Yes.
And it's that quantum moment, because no one means to be that way. It's just some stupid joke they were taught. How many times do men tell demeaning jokes about women, or women tell demeaning jokes about men without realizing, oh, I'm being a jerk right now.
Right. Right. And sometimes we just need to be called out in a loving way.
Would I say this about my son? Would I say this about my daughter? You know, like if I'm a woman saying that men are stupid or whatever it is, would I say this about my son? That's always the thing that gets
right. Yeah. Bring it home. Bring it really tight to you, and then see how it feels. Yeah. Wow. This has been such a beautiful discussion. Thank you so much for having it with me.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, I like talking about this because I don't hear these perspectives shared very often. I think they should be. I think they're another step on the healing journey to say, hey, it's not okay for anybody to beat up anybody else, regardless of the reason.
Yes.
Let's all just be peaceful and try to heal it.
Yes. Yep. Healing is the way to go. Absolutely. It's about the healing. So good. I hope we help somebody heal today. Just one person would be fine for me. Just one.
Yeah.
Because
things a little different. This is how, and this is not the end of the conversation. We're not to fix everything.
Right.
It's just, this is how we feel right now in the moment. Next year, we might be saying something different, and we are allowed to. Right.
And we can continue to have this conversation. And anytime you guys out there are having this conversation, I'd like to encourage you all to focus on the positive aspects of this conversation.
How do we fix it? All of
the light side. And how do we fix it? Where are the solutions? Let's not focus on the problems anymore. We just stay in problem land. Yeah. So let's leave everybody with a song. What song are we going to pick for the listeners today,
You
Charis?
know what song I would love?
What?
To bring all the races together? I would love the song by Enya called Storms in Africa.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you, Charis. And
thank you.
That's it for the day, everyone. Thank you so much. Until next time, we love you.
Much love.
Also, if you're craving more consciousness elevating content, be sure to check out Gaia, which is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web, where you can stream an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. As you all hear Brandon constantly say, it is a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration, and if you're looking to journey deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place we know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out.